Although herbicide-resistant weeds are not a new problem, in many parts of the U.S., resistant weeds are on the rise. Some of the hardest to control weeds have become resistant to many popular herbicides, including glyphosate. Tankmixing multiple effective sites of action, or SOAs, can significantly reduce the chance of developing weed resistance. However, this strategy works only if each component of the tank mix is effective against the target weeds. That means growers must look beyond the number of sites of action in a tank mix to the number of effective sites of action, a distinction that is often lost.
Site of action is an important terminology for farmers. It's important that farmers understand what a site of action is. And what a site of action is, it indicates how a herbicide acts within the plant, the specific pathway that herbicide or that group of herbicides are influencing within a plant level. Herbicides are selective, meaning certain herbicides, not all herbicides will kill all weeds. So some sites of action are only going to be effective in certain weed species. Some are effective in grasses, some are effective in broadleaf species, some are effective only in some broadleaf species, but not all. So it gets a little complicated.
To relieve some of the complication, growers should first properly identify the weeds in their field. Then growers need to identify what sites of action are going to be effective in combating that weed or multiple weeds in some cases. Mixing various sites of action leads to better levels of weed control and less problems with herbicide resistance.
So in terms of herbicide resistance management, one of the biggest misconceptions there is that by throwing multiple sites of action, we're going to be able to control a resistant weed species, and that's not necessarily right. It's important for farmers that they understand the difference between multiple sites of action and multiple effective sites of action. So when they're mixing, we want them to mix effective sites of action. So there's three things: timing, selectivity, and resistance. Timing is important. Some of these sites of action, they're only effective pre-emergence. So once a weed is established, that site of action is no longer effective on that established plant. The second thing, some sites of action are only effective when the plants are small. For instance, group 14 herbicides or your PPO herbicides are contact products. They tend to do a better job on smaller weeds than taller weeds, and that's because it's difficult to get good coverage on a big established plant. Selectivity, not all sites of action work on all species. For example, group 1 or your ACCA's herbicides are only effective in grasses. So adding that to the tank mix is not going to have a big impact on your overall water hemp or giant ragweed control. So we have 18 different sites of action, but not all are going to be effective sites of action. So you need to understand what type of resistance you have in your farm, okay? Because if you have resistance to that particular site of action, that's no longer an effective site of action. So an effective site of action is a site of action that, one, has impact on the weed species you're trying to control, so that site of action acts on that weed species and you don't have resistance to that particular site of action.
Research has shown that site of action pre-mixing is most effective in preventing weed resistance, followed by rotating different sites of action. Herbicide-resistant weeds can spread rapidly in fields and lead to significant yield losses and much higher weed management costs. To protect crop yields and avoid weed resistance, farmers must adopt an integrated program of best management practices, knowing which sites of action to use in the premix, and develop a pre- and post-spray program as well.
A strong recommendation that we have for farmers is to start clean and stay clean. A good way to start clean is going to be through an effective burn down. If you are in a no-till system, use multiple effective sites of action there for that burn down. Now, if you are in a till system, tillage tends to assist starting clean. At that time is also important, around planting time is important to put an effective pre-emergence herbicide program, because those pre-emerge herbicides are going to help you start clean, and they're also going to reduce the number of weeds within that field that would need to be managed by a post-emergence herbicide application. So you take some of that selection pressure away from your post-herbicide program. And then when you come with your post-herbicide application, you don't want to wait too long until weeds are past the 4 or 5 inch, because then it becomes more difficult to control them, and what you're doing, you're pretty much expediting the selection process for resistance.
Growers have a variety of resources available to help with site of action selections. The National Weed Science Society has numbered each group of herbicides under the same MOA and SOA for ease of reference when growers are planning their herbicide program. For selection and questions about resistance, feel free to ask local experts.
farmers can get more information is to contact their state specialists, agronomists, or industry representatives. Those folks are always willing to help farmers sort things out.
Learn more about our herbicides on the cropscience.bayer.us website.